In this modern world, nothing can be more apparent than the fact that small SUVs are literally everywhere. Walk into any Starbucks and you'll see 5 or 6 of things like this, tall, boxy, upright, look like they're capable off-road, but they probably aren't, sitting there in the parking lot waiting for their owners to return and spill lattes all over the inside. That's where you find these cars, but not just there, you find them pretty much everywhere. Everywhere small SUVs are driving around, they are enormously popular. But where did this all begin? How has this small SUV improved since its genesis in the 90s and the 2000s? Stuff like this Land Rover Freelander V6 really set the trail in the 90s and 2000s, like this Honda CR-V, Toyota RAV4. Soft roaders is what they called them. They were cars that were more capable than regular cars, but not Jeeps. You wouldn't want to take them on any off-road trails unless you had a friend with a Jeep and a tow cable with them and you just wanted to screw around and have some fun. This isn't exactly a fair comparison because these two cars are from different time periods and were made for different purposes. The Land Rover was made as something that can be taken off-road often-ish, capable on what the British call green lanes, things like that. So this was designed actually to do a fair amount of off-roading, but where this car falls short is everything on the road, which is what you're going to be using it for 99% of the time. This BMW X1 gives the distinct impression that if it were faced with the possibility of off-roading, it would probably just break down and cry. BMW SUVs have always been made for on-road use primarily, and taking it on a dirt road if you need it, if you absolutely have to. Small SUVs can give a lot of their credit to things like the original Ford Explorer, which were tall, boxy, yes, like the Ford Bronco and the Chevrolet K5 Blazer of the time, but they were designed to be more for on-road purposes like hauling families, but were still four-wheel drive for bad weather, for instance. The Land Rover Freelander was Land Rover's first attempt to make a car-based soft roader as a starter into their lineup. Even though it's a soft roader and is generally going to be used for hauling families on regular roads, it's still built to look and feel rugged and off-road like, so that it seems capable and it's not like a complete joke. So you can see this has on the wheel arches actual plastic protective cladding. It's got raised roof rails that look quite serious. It's got even plastic door mirrors because you wouldn't want to scratch paint on a trail from branches. It's got these utilitarian looking door handles. There's no styling put into those. They're just for function and they're plastic. You also have plastic below that for protection when you're opening the door. You don't want to hit it against a tree or something like that, or more likely another crossover in the Starbucks parking lot. And you've got high ground clearance, small wheels, lots of sidewall on the tires, and a full-size spare tire mounted to the back door, which is actually a door because the weight of a spare tire would make it too hard to lift up as a lift gate. It's upright and it's boxy and it looks mean and serious and ready to take some trails. This Land Rover here might be the top-end luxury trim level, yet still look quite rugged and off-road like. Whereas the X1 right here, this 2023 U11 BMW X1 xDrive 28i is the rugged looking trim level. It's the X-Line trim, which is supposed to add some off-road friendly appearances like these fake plastic cladded wheel arches. They're painted and they don't even flare out that much, so they're not useful. You can get it in an even more sporty on-road looking trim level called the M Sport, which makes it look like a tall, hot hatchback, not so much like a crossover. But that's really just the purpose of this car. It's not meant to go off-road. It's meant to be used for hauling your small family around a little bit more comfortably and luxuriously than something like a Toyota Corolla Cross. Roof rails on this, just a pinch above the roof line, but they're still useful for things like roof bars, pretty much the same way as they are on the Land Rover there. And around the back, you have a traditional tailgate that is power operated. No spare tire in sight. If you need a spare tire, it's within the tailgate and underneath the floor, and there's your space saver, which is basically like a paper plate compared to what you have actually on the car. So my advice is don't take this on any rocky paths or anything like that. Just don't take it off-road. You can drive it in the snow occasionally. I just wouldn't take it off-road ever. But the thing is that this is going to 100% have an advantage over the Freelander when it comes to everything on road. Fuel economy, handling, power, everything. Let's talk powertrain. What's happened in small SUVs, soft roaders over the past 20 years? In this, the Freelander, the top level Freelander, you have a 2.5 liter Rover K-Series V6, which produces 174 horsepower and gets an average of about 17 miles per gallon, but you could easily get worse than that. I've had this car for 3 years. Highest I've ever seen was like 19 miles per gallon. And don't even get me started on reliability. I've done enough talking about that. Whereas on the BMW X1, which is much cleaner underneath the hood, you have a 2 liter turbocharged 4-cylinder engine, which makes 241 horsepower. So a smaller engine, less cylinders, less explosions per second, and it makes 70 horsepower more than the old Freelander, while also getting something like 10, 12 mpg higher. Again, when it comes to on-road use, this beats the old car in terms of performance and fuel economy, and let's be honest, reliability, or at least we should hope, because the bar is not set very high with this car. Also, maintenance on a transversely mounted 2.5 liter V6 is bound to be a little bit harder when it comes to packaging and reaching things than a 2 liter 4-cylinder, but new cars tend to be more complicated and harder to work on than old cars, so you never know. In terms of noise though, it's 4-cylinder versus V6, it's up to your personal preference. Let's hear these two cars rev it out. Let's talk a little bit about comfort, technology, practicality, everyday stuff. Now, Freelander, old car, so it has an old traditional key that you stick in the steering column, turn it. What you're greeted with immediately is 4 analog gauges, 4 more warning lights than there really should be, and you have a tiny little LCD screen thing that just shows basic information, what gear you're in, your odometer, the temperature outside, very high tech, and a trip computer. That's really all you get. In terms of entertainment, you have a radio. It does have a CD player and it says Land Rover. Yeah, you have a radio. That's about all you get. And I also have a nice little LCD clock looking thing up there, which is cool. Controls for your front and rear fog light, your rear wiper, your hazard warning lights. You're going to be pressing that button a lot. You've got air vents down here, very simple, easy to use because it's manual air conditioning with just a dial. Heated seats, which in the BMW, the heated seat levels are hot, extremely hot, excruciatingly hot, and my ass is magma. Whereas this car, it has just one setting, which is just right. This is just right, just warm enough for when I'm going greenlining in my 4x4 Freelander. I've got one heated seat setting which is just good enough for me. Don't want anything more. More. In the center you have a traditional gear selector, which I think for this car is a little complicated because it has PRND421, but it also has a sport mode and a manual mode, which is a little weird. I don't know why this needs a manual mode when the BMW X1 actually doesn't have a manual mode. This does, which is weird. Just take my word for it. It's usually the other way around. This shouldn't have a manual mode, that car should. This also has a traditional regular parking brake. You also have a sunroof control, which sunroof works really well. It's closed. And you have a control for your back window, which I will show you in a minute. Also in the center, I have a small storage area, which isn't that great. There are some buttons on the steering wheel, which of a car of this age, you could either take or leave. Some had them, some didn't. Most new cars have them now. When it comes to walking up and opening the car, the BMW X1 really has the win, because all it needs to do is sense the key in your back pocket and you just pull on the door handle and it unlocks for you. The Freelander, you have to stick the key in the door and turn it. It's supposed to have a key fob, but it doesn't work. And you immediately see many more angles, many more screens. These materials are more luxury car-esque rather than useful, purposeful like they are in the Freelander. In the center, you have this nub as a gear selector, just a nub. You have couplers here in the center. You have charging ports everywhere, lots of storage. It's very smart, it's very clean, it's very luxurious. You have a huge glass panoramic moonroof thing, which can vent in the front, which is nice. Chunky, sporty feeling steering wheel in front of you, and two large screens. Your gauge cluster is a screen itself, and it's configurable with your various drive modes. Shows you information like the fact that that door is open right now, and your speed, the outside temperature, the time, how many miles you have until you're out of fuel, and no warning lights yet. In the center, you have a very smart, clean infotainment system, which is like your smartphone. It's got many, many, many different apps. You can look into your car, you can have it navigate you somewhere, you can play your own music, you can add widgets, adjust the seat positions with this screen. You can look at your cameras all around the car. This car has parking sensors and cameras and everything that you would want for parking easily. That car, the Freelander, does have two cameras, and they're right here, right and left. And you have to pivot, look outside, look at the mirrors. This thing has things like blind spot monitoring and all the new modern technologies just to keep you safe, keep you alert. One mark against the BMW though is that the climate controls are all integrated into a different screen, which can be a little complicated in some applications. In this car, it's not too bad, pretty simple, but the fact that it's on the screen and put into a different menu is kind of strange. Down below, you also have a wireless charger. Your volume knob is down here, but you also have controls on the steering wheel like you would want. You can call people from the steering wheel. You can pretty much do everything from the steering wheel here. It's quite useful. And again, just lovely leather materials everywhere. It does feel boxy and upright, which not all modern soft rotors, crossovers do. You have plenty of headroom. It feels like I have miles of headroom above me, but really I don't have that much. It just feels nice, luxurious, and clean up here. Back seat room, now I get into the Freelander. I am 6'3". This seat is in my driving position. Obviously, it's my car. When you shut the door in this car, it feels manly, it's loud, it slams, kind of shakes the car around a little bit. You really feel like you're doing something, whereas in the X1, it's a much softer feeling door when you close it. I have no legroom at all. My legs are pushing into the seat in front of me, even though this is around the same size as the X1. I do have plenty of foot room, and I sit back, and even though, as you can see, the roof over the back seat passengers is raised up, I still can feel my head touch barely. That could just be because the headlining is sagging slightly in this car. That's a common Land Rover thing. It's not super uncomfortable because this seat is quite soft, so my legs pressing into it isn't actively hurting or anything. And while this is annoying and you can feel it messing up your hair, it's not craning your back, messing up your posture or anything like that. I also have these handy little nets up here, which is kind of funny to see. You can put you have a light up here. You can turn no, that doesn't work. I have this window switch. Oh yeah, this window doesn't work. I have a cigarette charging outlet here. Down here you can charge devices off of it, or it's probably a traditional cigarette lighter as well. Actually, I don't think it is. No, it's not. You see from this cover that is actually broken off that it is just a power outlet back here, which is kind of nice for a car of this age that you have a power outlet back here. They kind of looked to the future and knew that kids would be on their iPads and things. And in the center, I have an armrest with some cup holders, useful enough cup holders. They're not the best, but they work. In the back of the BMW X1, this seat is also in my driving position. I can still feel my knees touching up against the seat a little bit if the seat is further back. Since this is a hard plastic cover back here, it is a little bit more comfortable. You can't press into it at all. I do have plenty of foot room again. Not that much headroom, but at least it's not touching this time. So it's about the same level of comfort in terms of space as the other car. But again, these are both two small crossover SUV type things, so you shouldn't expect them to have oodles of space back here. But you look at this door panel and it has so much more design to it, whereas that is just purposeful and gimmick free. You do have a taller transmission tunnel than you do in the Freelander, so rear seat passengers could find it even more uncomfortable back here. But you do have vents for the rear seats and two traditional modern USB-C charging outlets back here. The only thing that's the exact same is this center armrest here, which has cup holders in it again, but you can fold it away if you need 3 seats. Also, this car has a red and black interior, which looks really cool, whereas the Freelander is just beige. Now we're gonna talk full-on rear practicality and cargo space. Let's start with the Freelander here. Now again, you do have a spare tire and this weird looking taillight that juts out of it, which means that this is actually a door back. So it opens this way, like this. Whereas on the BMW X1, traditional modern, threw off my pattern, traditional modern luxury crossover, you have a power lift gate, which lifts up. There's not really many benefits or drawbacks between these two types of designs, except for the fact that if you back up against something in the Freelander, this juts out a lot further than this would. But in terms of cargo space, it looks like the Freelander's cargo space might be more useful than the X1's. The X1's is a little deeper, but the Freelander is boxier and taller. The actual volume of a cargo area means absolutely nothing if you can't use it. So this is definitely a better integration because it's tall and upright and even more boxy. I thought the X1 looked boxy until I looked back at this. This cargo space, while it's not as much as the X1, is definitely more useful. We'll drive the Freelander first. Immediately when you pull out, you notice the ride. Every bump is muffled out. Nothing is too offensive or jarring in any way. But the problem with this car is that it handles so poorly. It is easily the worst handling car I've ever driven, hands down. The body roll is absolutely immense to the point where I would call it dangerous. There is that typical SUV sticker right there that tells you to not turn it at high speeds or else it'll roll over, and I 100% believe it, and I'm not gonna try it. I mean, it's hard to describe. The center of gravity must be up here somewhere. It's pretty ridiculous. In terms of noise, now that this car's exhaust leak has been addressed, it's quite quiet and quite smooth. There is a little bit of wind noise, definitely. Air conditioning in this car has nothing on the BMW X1's air conditioning because it's manual and it's also designed by Land Rover, which is based on a small rainy rock in the Atlantic Ocean. I don't think they need air conditioning as much as we do in the Utah desert, but it's pretty good. I mean, I think they kind of did know that not everywhere is like England. There is actually sun out there somewhere, so they put in pretty decent for the age and for the company and the brand air conditioning system. 2.5 liter V6, 174 horsepower. Pray it doesn't explode when I do this. Temperature gauge is holding steady, still holding steady. Keep your fingers crossed that I didn't just cause irreversible damage. So yeah, it does make a nice sound when you put your foot down, but it does only manage 0 to 60 in like the 10s, which is not brilliant. The X1 is a lot quicker when you put your foot down, and also a lot less stressful because I was really worried back there that I was gonna break something when I did that. But I gotta say, it is nice to just look down and have my analog gauges and my check engine light with its warm amber glow right there reminding me what kind of car I'm driving. In the center, if I want to turn the air conditioning up a little, it's just one little flick of my wrist. Easy to understand radio and CD controls, and I even have a clock there. The downside of that is that there's not a lot of technology. Obviously, there's no navigation. I can't easily like pair my phone and do Apple CarPlay or something like that. But The upside is that it's just simple. So behind the wheel of the X1, it's quieter. The ride is definitely harsher than in the Freelander, a little bit too bumpy for my taste. But the difference is, the trade-off is that I can take this turn at 25 miles an hour and not have to go home and change my underwear afterwards. This car handles its weight really well. It does definitely have a little bit of body roll, body motion, a slight hint of top heaviness. Compared to the Freelander, this thing feels like a Miata. I mean, it handles like a sports car in comparison. And it also rides like a sports car. Like, the ride comfort is not up to the Freelander's standards. See how much quicker this is than the Freelander. Whoa, that was 50 miles an hour in like less than 10 seconds. That's weird. This thing has a 0 to 60 in the 6-second range, which is pretty bonkers for a car of this size that looks like this. But I mean, all it takes is just flex your toe and the turbo kicks in and it throws you back in your seat a lot harder than you're ready for. And in terms of noise, the 4-cylinder engine doesn't make an intrusive sound in the cabin, which is good. And there's not a lot of wind noise or anything like that. These crossovers have gone so far from what they were before, and even Land Rover's current offering, the Discovery Sport, it's also a lot more on-road friendly looking. It still has off-road technologies and a bunch of cool stuff and can probably handle its own on a trail. You look at the Freelander next to a Discovery Sport or this car, and you can really see the change in design over the years. Drive them back to back and you can really feel the change as well. This thing is tighter, faster, quieter, handles better. It's just, in terms of driving, it's better in every way. But if I was going on a complicated, difficult off-road trail and I had a choice between the X1 and the Freelander, first of all, that would be an utter nightmare because the Freelander is so hideously unreliable and the X1 is not for off-road driving, so it's not a decision you want to have at all. But if I was on an off-road trail, had to pick one of these cars, I would probably go for the Freelander. Smaller wheels, more sidewall on the tires. It's got higher ground clearance, softer suspension, so it can handle undulations and things like that a little bit better. Doesn't have as much power, but Freelander is bound to get way further than an X1. It's really what you want to pick, but also there is one more thing. This car, $40,000. Freelander cost me $950. Was $4,000 in repairs, but you know, who's counting that? That's gonna do it for me on this video. I hope everybody has an awesome day. Bye-bye.